Alright guys, well, I think the most common comment that I've had since I started the series with the Lenovo C940 has always been about the cooling. Because previous models, and including the C940, there's always been kind of a lingering background issue of cooling noise with the fans and the way they ramp up. I talked about this a little bit previously in one of the earlier videos where I talked about the Lenovo Vantage software, the update they did that really ruined the software, and some of the Windows settings that you can use to try and configure the system to work a little better, depending on what you're doing on the system. I've continued to get a lot of comments and questions, and I wanted to do a bit of a revisit towards that and go a little more in depth. To that end, Lenovo also updated the Vantage software and added in a little more what they call intelligent cooling solution to it. Now, I have not used that because, again, all of my responses to all of the questions and comments have been on either the full performance or the cool and quiet performance options that were in there. So I did not use the intelligence one. Now the software is still being intelligent because it's not going to crank the fans to full bore if there's no load on the CPU. So everything is set within certain thermal thresholds. So first and foremost, I wanted to jump in. I'll record the screen of the computer and kind of talk about the various settings that I'm really trying to highlight in this as very basic low-level stuff. And then I'll switch over to the other video and I'll talk a little bit about my testing scenario on that end. Now, these again are just very basic settings. And my computer is still mostly stock, to be honest. I've only done, I think, 4 Windows updates, the mandatory ones, since I bought the thing, the big 1909 update. I still haven't applied that. I've done no BIOS flashing, no driver updates other than in mandatory, anything that's required. Lenovo Vantage has updated itself twice now, once to ruin the software and once adding in this other feature that I hadn't noticed. I've done a little bit of content creation and work on it, but for the most part right now it's still just a consumption device, and that's why I'm not trying to keep it fully 100% up to date. I'm doing the critical, but usually when I'm grabbing this thing, it's because I have a little bit of time to go relax. I don't want to spend 20 minutes doing updates. I want to pick it up, grab it, use it, relax, and then go back to whatever else I'm doing. Doesn't mean that my usage doesn't change at times and I may need to grab it and use it for something a lot more, but that's my basic usage. So I have pushed it, as my tests will show, but I wanted to make sure that I clarified some aspects of that. So let's jump into the unit itself, take a look at some of the changes to the software, and then go into the tests, and we'll go from there. So, all right, so here in the computer, again, I keep my Lenovo system, or the Lenovo Vantage software, in conservative mode so that I only use 60% of the battery. Down here you can see the addition. So you've got intelligent, performance, and battery saving, and you can simply click between which one you want. I, again, leave it in extreme performance because for me, again, cooling is more important than noise level. I do like a balance. I'm not going to say that I just love hearing the fans ramp up for no reason and stay cranked at maximum, but if it comes down to, do I want it silent or do I want good performance? I want good performance. Nothing chaps my chops more than seeing stuttering, thermal throttling, feeling it overheating. All that stuff just really gets on my nerves, so no thank you to that. So if I pull up Task Manager here, you can see that right now the biggest thing that's running are some anti-malware and TeamViewer because I'm remoted in to record it. And right now, because not much is happening, TeamViewer is not using that much. But again, this is why I don't record straight off of TeamViewer for a lot of my tests, just to call that out. Now, if I go into the Lenovo Vantage software, not much really to talk about in here. If I go under my device settings, the first option is the cooling option. So you can get to it through the shortcut. Now, I don't know exactly when this came in because, again, I choose the Ron Popeil method of options here, set it and forget it. Now, my unit is still, again, mostly stock as I called out. I've only done a couple of Windows updates and whatever mandatory driver updates came with Windows. So that's about it. Other than that, I have not done any updates on my unit. So once I set it to extreme performance, I've left it. Now, I'm glad they added this intelligent cooling back in, but honestly, extreme performance is also intelligent based on certain thermal rules. So if it hits a certain temperature, the fans start to kick on. If it detects a certain load, the fans kick on. I don't know their algorithm. I don't know their logic, but something in there is driving it to fire up. Now, in the extreme performance option, it's going to ramp up quickly and fast. So it's an aggressive cooling solution. And this is often why I believe so many people are hearing the fans fire up and getting annoyed at it. Now, if you fire to battery mode, you can see maximum battery life by automatically adjusting the brightness, changing power settings, disabling features, advanced image processing, etc. So in this mode, the cooling is still intelligent to a degree, but for the most part, it's going to disable things and leave it alone. Extreme performance, maximum everything. So they call it out, big noise. Now, in intelligent cooling, best experience with fan speed and system performance is balanced. For example, when gaming, it optimizes the performance. When in office, it reduces the noise. Great. I can just leave it in extreme performance and it gives me essentially the same thing. So good option. I'm glad you put it back in, but still not what I want. I want a fan curve. Moving on. The biggest impact to your performance is going to be down here. This is the Windows slider option. So if you have it all the way to the left, which is honestly 95% of how I utilize it typically, it's going to restrict as much performance as it can to deliver a reasonable expectation to me while maintaining the best battery life, the best cooling, all of it. And this is honestly the best thing you can do to try and maintain cool and quiet. So you can see as I select some options, you can see spikes in CPU utilization. As the system grabs some information or does something, you can see a spike. The CPU speed is extremely slow. That's driving very low power. So if I fire up the cool temperatures here, see we're currently running at about 42 Celsius. That is not bad at all. That is pretty good. Now, I do this in my tests, but if I throw this up to maximum performance, you can see the CPU spiked, you can see the speed shut up, and look at the temperatures. I just hit 87 Celsius as my peak. I'm averaging in the 50s now. You can see that the CPU is now thinking about a lot more stuff. I've enabled it to start doing more. If I come back here to the processes, look at what TeamViewer is using now. Look at all these background processes that are now all fired up using extra aspects of the system. Task Manager, system is likely downloading Windows updates. There's all these other things that are starting to go through. And look at that, TeamViewer is at 5.3%. My load is now on average from 52 Celsius to about 50 Celsius. We'll call it 49 Celsius. All that simply by throwing the maximum option in Windows up. Drop it back down and let's see what happens. CPU is restricted now. Utilization goes down. Temperatures are still up, but it's going to take a minute to get out of there because the fans didn't ramp up yet, so it's got to dissipate naturally. Go under Processes. Task Manager is now the highest process. TeamViewer has dropped significantly, cut it in half. So this is minor, and I'm doing nothing. I am just simply sitting here looking at these two options being remoted into it for recording. That is all I'm doing. That is how much of a difference a couple megahertz, a couple gigahertz, and a little bit of power running through the system can spike temperatures. Now keep in mind that spike is because, again, it didn't hit the thermal level for it to kick the fans on. If I was sustaining loads in the 52 to 54 area, I think that's when the fans start to kick on, so they might have fired up once or twice over there. I can't really hear it just because I got the air conditioner running in the house and all these other sounds, so I wouldn't have heard them kick on unless they really fired up. But again, natural dissipation here has got me almost back down to where I was originally. I'm still 1 to 2 degrees higher than I was when I started that test, all by moving a slider. So what I suggest to anybody who's concerned about temperatures and thermals and the way the system runs, get your butt in Task Manager, get up something simple like CPU ID hardware monitor, play with these sliders, pay attention to what's utilizing your system here in the background, look at the performance and see what's going on. If Wi-Fi is constantly running, something is downloading, something is updating. You've got telemetry, you've got Cortana, you've got something that's using it in the background. If the GPU is spiked, you have something in there that is driving graphical impacts to the CPU. It's an integrated system like I called out. So when I threw this up to the maximum, likely some intense stuff hit the GPU. Right now it's probably trying to render some of the screen and send it off to me. Same with your CPU. These processes, it may not look like much, but it adds up. So right now these top options here are accounting for 10% CPU load, and I'm really not doing that much. Remove TeamViewer and it goes down a lot, but still. it really makes a difference. And background processes are likely killing a lot of people's computers as they run updates, they download drivers. Lenovo Vantage updates on its own. There's all these other things that are potentially running in the background that if you have the enablement of performance, it's going to use that performance and it will take it. So keep an eye on these things. You can open the resource monitor and dig a lot more in depth into what's going on the system. But keep in mind, running all of these things can again cause a bit of a spike. So that's what I want to call out in the software. So on my testing, what I did was I set the computer on a countertop down in my kitchen. I set my microphone, the same one that I record all my videos on the counter, pointed right at the side where the fan noise would be the loudest. I didn't change the audio levels. They're the same as they are when I record my voice right now in all my other videos. And I pointed them right there. And I ran through a couple of varied tests. So I'm doing some basic idling like this, where you don't hear anything, just to establish the background noise of the refrigerator if the AC kicked on, and ambient sound. And then I fired up some YouTube videos. They're high quality 4K videos, and I started with just basic 1080p. No stress, no noise, no problem. Then I upgraded the quality to the videos, and I ended up just leaving them downloading at 4K. Even though I can't display 4K, I was still pulling in the bitrate, which means the Wi-Fi utilization would have been higher on those videos, just to put an extra load on it. And I ran them in full screen, driving the whole pixels. I tested those videos in various modes of this slider, just to show you what the temperatures do and how everything in the system handles it and what the noise does. And then I toggle between the audio being on and the audio being off so that you can hear how much noise the system is generating against the output of the speakers. And keep in mind that this microphone is putting everything here at a disadvantage to capture as much noise as possible from the computer. When you're standing above the system, it's not going to reflect all that noise back at you until it hits a certain decibel range. And there were a few times where I'm sure this thing was picking up the fans. I could see the meters on it moving. I had to bend my head down and get a little lower before I could actually hear the fan noise there. So keep that in mind as we look at this. I then run through some higher load tests in Dota 2 and Ring of Elysium. And then I plugged the power into the system and repeated the basic tests again, showing that just by simply charging the batteries, I'm creating a huge extra amount of heat as power is being fed into the unit while I'm drawing power from it. So it puts a lot of extra heat into the system and can cause problems. So I wanted to call those things out in my test before I did this. Now, I do not record these videos on the computer itself, and there's a reason for that. You saw it right here in the processes. I'm putting a fairly hefty load on here, and if I start playing games and doing all this other stuff, the load that is being generated by the remote application is going to spike the noise levels on the system. So I don't want to do that because I'm putting a fairly heavy load on it, and I want to test just that load. You're not likely going to be remoted into the computer to play a game. So I don't want to have that adding to the noise, adding to the load, adding to the stress of the system. I want just the test to be there. The other reason is because I want to show you that I'm not doing anything special to the system. I'm going congruently across the whole thing. So I may speed sections up to get to various heat saturation, but I'm not going to cut straight between things unless I'm moving between tests. Everything is going to be visible to you, so you can't say, oh, you did this or oh, you did that. It proves the test is valid. So keep that in mind, and remember, I'm running an i5, so let's jump into the tests. Current ambient temperature is bouncing between 37 Celsius and 38 Celsius. A couple dips at the 36, so I'm going to call it 38 Celsius as an average. You can see my CPU load is currently pretty low. There's a few things running in the background that's jumping up and down every now and then. So it's running a couple of updates in the background and a few other things that are causing some minor spikes, but overall the CPU is hanging out between 3 and 8%. I'm currently configured at low power mode for conservative usage. And then I currently have the laptop set to extreme performance cooling, not using intelligent and not using battery savings. So This is just pure idle. Now the package has jumped up a little bit in temperature because of course there's some things downloading at the moment, so thank you Lenovo Software. This is partly why it's taken a little while to get this test to run, because almost every time I boot up there's some sort of an update running. That's my gripe against Windows and the way all of that runs. So if I come over here to the CPU, you can see I'm currently running at 1 gigahertz. Again, low average usage is 38 Celsius. So because the system is currently not heavily being used, spiking a bit, which is annoying, but I'm going to jump in and do a little bit of YouTube and hopefully get the stupid thing to stop fighting me. So let's jump in here. You can hear the complete silence. The only thing running right now is my refrigerator and my voice. So this is current ambient. I will be quiet for a moment while the video plays, and you should hear how quiet it truly is, and then I will turn on the audio at 10 so you can hear the difference. And the microphone is located literally right there off to the side, pointed right at where the fan intake and the exhaust is right here. So this is worst case noise scenario. From my altitude, I probably won't hear much. So let's have a listen. So that's currently an average of about 42 degrees Celsius. Now it should be a little better, but currently there's still some of those background processes running that are kind of eating through what's going on. This is a 1080p video that's running. So let's switch over to a 2K video that's running. You can see here it's currently set to 1440p. Full screen it and repeat the process. Alright, so CPU is calmed down. That's fewer background processes running. My package temperature is still at about 42 Celsius. It's peaking a little bit at 43, but on the whole it's holding steady at 42. So not a lot going on there. Now that video sounded like fan noise, but that was just the waves crashing. So let's switch to the next video, which I have set up at 4K. See, 2160p. Jump into full screen, and once again, repeat the same test. Alright, so it should translate pretty well here to the video. Now it might not be as butter smooth as I'm seeing it. This is an FHD display, so I am running downloading a resolution that is much greater than I can display, and I'm only doing that just to put more load on the CPU by drawing more out of the Wi-Fi, and you can see the peaks on the Wi-Fi as it's pulling down the 3 different video types that are running. The CPU is still only running at about 1 gigahertz, really, occasionally spiking higher. I'm using very little amount of my CPU right now with this video running in the background, more memory than anything, and I'm currently holding pretty steady at 44 Celsius. Now again, there are some spikes up to 45, 46, but a lot of that again comes from the background processes that are running. Since I'm using the computer now and I'm directing what's going on, it's not peaking quite as high as it was before. Now, again, this is my standard setting. I've got power mode set to minimal, brightness is turned at minimal. This is a beautiful display, and doing this allows me to conserve a lot of power. If I have some sunlight, sure, I can throw the brightness up a little bit. It's going to drop the battery life a little more, generate more heat, but on the whole, it's fine. So currently, we're still holding 44-45. I'm playing a 4K video. Let's jump power mode up to 1 notch. Huge spike in activity. You can see the CPU's now jumped way up. You can see all these other background processes that Windows has now thrown into action to start doing things that I don't want to happen because I have given them some extra bandwidth to utilize. So now, a lot of folks that are complaining about the activity on this thing, I'm believing this is what's killing your systems and your activity here. Not much going on the GPU there, but so now my average temperature, just by bumping that up 1, has jumped up to 54, 57. And that's really inaccurate because of all this other stupid crap that Windows is doing in the background. The last time I ran this test, Windows wasn't doing squat, so I got a much better read by bumping it up 1, and you could see the temperatures move a little bit. The problem was you couldn't read this CPU ID on your own and had to rely on my running text on top of it, and that's not what I want to represent. I don't mind reading it out, I don't mind showing things, but I want you to be able to see it so that you can see I'm not BSing you. Now for all of you folks that have i7s and all that other stuff, this is running in the background. This is the problem with Windows 10 that is chomping through your resources at random, causing temperature spikes. And even with all that running in my voice, the microphone is still pointed right at the fans, and they're not running. So even with those spikes, ambient diffusal of hot to cool air, we're down to 50, 51 Celsius right now with the CPU being more active than it should be at the moment and really only playing 1 video in the background. So that's pretty dang good. If you're running a QHD display, then your usage is going to be a lot heavier. Your temps will probably be up by 3 to 4 degrees because it's got more pixels to try and drive off of the same CPU. Now if I give it even more horsepower here, let's bump it up another notch to performance, we'll see another spike in some of the usage. We will see some more temperatures running. Thankfully Windows appears to have backed off some of what it's doing, so it's not going crazy. And you can see that ambient has actually cooled down to 49 Celsius right now. I can max it out, and we're still holding steady with a 4K video playing in the background. We just bounced back up to 50 Celsius. Thankfully, whatever was downloading in the background has shut up enough to not freak my system out. So, that's the YouTube test. Now, I can't display 4K video, but I can download it, and that certainly has an impact on what I'm doing. So now, what I'm going to do, if I don't keep kicking the camera, sorry about that, is I'm going to throw this back down into the minimal, come back over here to the performance tab. We should see things throttle down. We're still seeing some spikes of utilization and Wi-Fi going on, so I think it's still trying to download some stuff in the background, but it's not having the same heavy effect that it was a moment ago. We should see the temperature start to come back down. There's 46, 44, 45, so we're headed back in the right direction. Now what I'm going to do is keep it in low mode, and I'm going to fire up a quick game of Dota 2. Now Dota 2, it's not a massively intense game, but this isn't a massively powerful graphics card either. It's an integrated one, and it only has so much that it can do to really keep things running. So let's get Dota fired up. I'm just going to run a very simple match against AI. If that thing goes away, solo looks good, fine, not a big deal. Let's start the match. I apologize for the camera blinking at you. This was the best camera to get close and show everything easily without having to do zooming in and getting all the pixels in it like my last video. Doesn't matter, let's just pick anybody. We're not really going to be playing. Let's skip to the match. Now I can hear the fan running very silent in the background. There they are ramping up. Temperatures at 63 to 64 Celsius right now. It was peaking at 65. That's what started the fans running. And the temperature should start to balance out now that the fans are running. So you can see we're at 59 to 61 right now. There's 58. No frame loss, so now I'm going to turn on the audio and let's see if you can still hear the fans.
My sentiments as well. Cut a notch with your mate. Rangers with candy. I go.
Alright, so sorry about that. I still had the video running in the background. But you could tell that the game really wasn't all that loud. Now we have picked up in temperature a little bit. We're pushing average in the low 60s, spikes to the mid to high 60s, and the CPU's not going too crazy. So let's bump the threshold up to where you would probably want it for gaming, which is best. And let's just see how quickly this goes. Package has already jumped to the 70s. Now we're hitting 80s and 90s. Fans should ramp up. They're kind of peaking right now.
Arrow fly. Into the fray. Your fate is sealed.
Alright. You can hear the fans, you can see my clock speed. CPU is not really being utilized because this really isn't driving the CPU that heavily. Now that the game is loaded, everything's up and running. What we're hearing is spiking because of the way the cooling system's working. It gets down to a certain temperature, the fans throttle down. Temperatures rise, the fans kick on, cool the thing down again. Now this is where I would prefer to have a fan curve where I can tell it to sustain the fans and not have the peaky performance, but it works. And this really is not all that loud. Again, the game masks most of the sound from the fans that you're going to hear at this particular level. All right. Alright, so my GoPro's battery is getting low. Again, I've had to reshoot this a couple of times. Let me throw into Ring of Elysium. And we should hear those things really ramp up during the intro video that is much more graphically intense. So let's get this running and see what happens. Again, I've got the CPU in max performance at the moment in this particular game, which is not designed to run on a computer like this. We're going to be seeing a lot higher of temperatures, and the fan should ramp up a lot more. So Lenovo Vantage had a hiccup. Didn't seem like my fans were ramping up because they are not kicking at full power, and that is not the temperature they should be at. Tons and tons of ads, holy cow. Let's do it this way so that the game launches quickly. Mute the sound. Let's see what the package temperature's at. 95. So it seems like it's trying to be more intelligent. Alright, so I apologize about that. My GoPro's battery decided to give out on me after many attempts at filming. The Lenovo software was updating when I first started this, and that's what was going on. So now the fans don't ramp up properly the way they were in the previous video. Because right now, the fans are finally starting to get to 100%, and you can see the temperatures up there are not at all where they should be. They should be holding something a little more stable. I am in game. It is playing just fine, considering that this is not the right way to play the game. We can look at the system utilization. Let me back up here. CPU is not fully utilized. Temperatures are holding at around 90 C. Unfortunately, it took a sustained 95 plus C before the fans finally ramped up. And up here at the back, it is really, really hot. So whatever update Lenovo just rolled out to satiate everybody freaking out about the fan noise is actually going to cause more of a dangerous problem with overheating the chip, damaging the hardware by running it so hot, and potentially burning people. I'm sorry, if your system is running at 90 Celsius, you need the fans running full bore to keep this system cool. I've got extreme performance selected, not intelligent. Even though it says it's running intelligent, I've got this one selected that should be ramping it up. If I go to Lenovo Vantage Software, and yes, I did just leave additional feedback saying stop breaking things, give us the freaking fan curve. You can see I've got this extreme performance selected. I don't know why they're pimping that, because there's no way to save the settings anywhere. It's all done already by just selecting it. And you can hear that the fans have turned off now. And my temps are still holding in the high 90s, high 80s, low 90s. So I don't know what the heck it's doing, but I've got this extreme performance selected. Extreme performance. I do not know why it keeps saying intelligent cooling up there. That's probably just locked in and I don't have an option on it, which is not how it was before. I was able to make a selection on there. So with that said, I'm now going to do the final test real quick. Sorry for bumping the microphone here. Which is plug in the power charger. You can see that the system just kind of reset to default. So let's throw this all the way to the best performance. Get the game back up. Temperatures are still holding a little higher now. They were in the high 80s. Typically though, when you're charging, you're running power into the system, which is creating heat here as well as in the conversion, and the battery cells are going to warm up as they're being balanced. So you've got your piping hot CPU that's running a load, you've got heat being generated from this, and just charging the system will bump the degrees up by 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees depending on what all you're doing. Now, I had this whole video worked out, shot multiple times with the previous running of Lenovo Vantage, and this is the 4th update that they've applied that just completely threw a wrench in my plans. The fans just kicked on again, and you can see the temperatures have started coming down. So if the fans were properly running max on here, I would probably be around 80 Celsius or less. So it's just ridiculous that they're willing to sacrifice my hardware because of complaints of noise. Just give us a fan curve. That's all it would take to fix this. Look at that. Like I said, if the fans would ramp up and sustain properly, I would be at 80 Celsius or better. The cooling system in this does work. It's not completely broken. It would be better if this was lifted off. So if I show you how close to the countertop that is, that's really low. This is a lift up from the case, not the actual foot pad. If you lift it up and you allow airflow to get in there when it's running, it will come down. And now you can see we're at 80 Celsius with peaks up a little more now that the case is down. So if the fans would stay running, this would be a much cooler system that's much safer. 70s, while I'm playing a game completely over what this system is supposed to be able to really handle smoothly. And it can do it. I could play this game if I hooked up a keyboard and mouse. It wouldn't be the best experience simply just because I could make it work by lowering more settings, but it's just insane that they're changing these things without really A, educating the user base, and B, thinking about the changes they're doing, because this keyboard is uncomfortably hot from running at this sustain. And back here, I don't want to hold that for too long because that's really hot. Like, I can hold it, but now it is hurting and burning my hand and I have to pull it off. All the way down to the W, S, F. Down here it's not so bad. But this whole upper portion is now heat saturated and it's going to take a while to cool off. So, just by lifting the front up, I was able to get enough airflow. So let's lift it up again. We'll just lift it to about there. Let some air get in there. Look at that drop from 84, 85 sustained. We're dipping into the 80s. We should hit the 79s again here soon. There you go, 79. Just from simply giving it a 1-inch lift on the front. So a slightly bigger foot pad on the back where the intakes are, which are right under here. This thing would be much cooler. Alright, well that's my video of the live demo here. Let me get out of the game. Yes, I don't care if I die, it's fine. I apologize for having to switch cameras, but again, I've been shooting this multiple times trying to capture the temperatures properly, trying to capture the noise, and then of course Lenovo started doing updates, Windows started doing updates, and now my whole plan's been thrown out the window because of all that. So, apologize for the disjoined aspects of that not operating as they normally would, but see, the fans are still not running at the maximum that they can, and the temps are not coming down fast enough. Part of that is because this is still going. So if I look at what's actually running, more updates. Because the system is able to, it is pulling down updates. Look at all that utilization. So, let's take away its ability to run. CPU usage should go down a little bit. It's just spreading it out to more apps now, but let's calm down a bit. Fans have shut down because we've come under the threshold. Sorry for the focus. That's what's breaking your temperature, folks. Background Windows processes and screwy Lenovo Vantage software that just doesn't seem to want to work properly. I'll be honest, the version that was running right before this video, that this video showed was downloading, I thought was much better because it was ramping up properly in conjunction to the temperatures. When I started hitting the mid-50s, the fans would ramp up to about 25%. 60s, closer to 50%, 70s, 75%. And if I started hitting 85, 90, fans were at 100%. And my temperatures were much more stable. I think this is going to be the new outro, since the outro I had recorded is pretty much bunk at this point because I was talking about the previous version of Lenovo Vantage. We're down to almost passive cooling. Sorry, had to lean in. We're almost down to just passive cooling. And you can see that the temperature is still a bit high. So Lenovo, give us a fan curve, stop breaking your software, and actually test it out before you break everything. I know people are complaining about temperatures and fans, but you can do more to educate folks instead of breaking the software more, because my laptop is still burning hot. That is unacceptable. I will not run this thing in that type of a power mode until that gets fixed, because I don't want to bake my thermal compound. Hope that helps everybody. The thermal problems aren't usually on the hardware itself. It's mostly down to Windows software being stupid, hate you Windows 10, and Lenovo Vantage, which I was singing praises to in the start of this video and was being much more happy with. Now I'm kind of cheesed off at it again, if you can't tell by the tone of my voice, because I'm really annoyed that they broke it at the moment, because it really was working much better for me. So not a happy camper. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.